So I'm actually from Arcon, right? So like she talked about everything, but I wanted to kind of just not talk about Arcon essentially from the product standpoint, but what we're trying to do, but more on the convergence aspect, right? I've been doing this for years now, 20 plus years, and kind of understanding how different ways of different vendors are working and how we can do a more of convergence. But I'm talking more on the convergence in the identity fabric, not in terms of the overall convergence, right? We're talking about digital with operational with physical security, everything together is a bigger convergence thing. But I'm going to talk more about the identity fabric standpoint. So if you look at that, the reason I picked, basically banking and government, because that's where we are seeing a lot of the gaps, the issues, and why the convergence is really needed, right? So the first and basic thing, it's simple, right? Security fragmentation. Whenever I go to talk to CISOs or CIOs or anyone, the problem they always have is segmented silos. Everyone is just struggling with the dashboards, the compliance, how to pull reports, what's happening where, and all those things. I think that's where it's important to understand that these silos are really, creating the gaps in the regulatory sectors. And then the sector specific threat vectors. Why I'm saying sector? Because if you take banking, there's API threats or insider threats. And for government, it's more about citizens, right? And how you are managing their privacy and the data overall in terms of ransomware and all those things. So that's one. And the biggest thing I think I see or we see, the reason we've kind of gone into convergence and building those products is, look at compliance. At today's world, I think everyone is meeting regulatory compliances, no problem there. But I think it's not just about compliance. It's more about getting into how resilient you are. How easy is it for you to kind of have, visibility and control and be more proactive in what decisions you're making and how you're strategizing your identity journey, right? And then that's why convergence has become quite strategic in and necessity in terms of strategy, right? That's where you're putting all IAM, PAM, ITDR, or even analytics, because you have more enhanced detection, single pane of glass, and you can actually do a lot of things in terms of governance and making sure you have more control over it. With that, so banking sector use cases, typically I already talked about it, but just expanding a little bit more, we're talking about continuous monitoring and adaptive access, right? And banking is a place where it's easy for anyone wants to attack and kind of have that gaps exposed, especially from interfaces and how the payments work, right? So from that aspect, I think it's very important to understand where the gaps are and how we are actually converging and getting these things from an overall picture. And then detect and block fraud, right? I think that's a major part for bankings. Essentially, if you look at, if you're integrating IAM and ITDR in this one, I think you are creating that, what do you call the anomalous activity that you could have, or any of the other threats in terms of detection and kind of response overall as well. And obviously the credential abuse too, right? The biggest threat always is identities and it's insider threats as well. So it's important we have to understand that aspect. And that's where you get the unified risk and compliance dashboards, right? You have one pane where you have visibility across all your identities, your access, and obviously your what do you call the events that are happening, which are supporting compliance and regulatory requirements as well. And then build trust through the cyber resilience, right? So customers typically expect the seamless, secure experience, right? There shouldn't be any confusion around where things are, who's doing what, where, when, how is very important, right? So that's where the resilience comes into picture. Even though compliance is there, those are the small things that actually creates a lot of problems and issues that we've seen. And similarly, I think it's a different sector. Obviously, it's much more bigger in nature, and then obviously from a threat and how the ransomware attacks and all those things are. So essentially, citizen data safeguarding. Again, it's pretty much the same concept from a banking, but I just wanted to kind of highlight in terms of ransomware resilience or trust and e-governance, right? The biggest problems that we are seeing also is from the digital platforms, transformation happens, you have tax or insurance or sorry health or social services. So all of these things, essentially you need to make sure your identity aspect is pretty covered and safe. And critical infrastructure protection, I think this is also quite important now, right? Because you have the IT and OT environments which needs that much more cyber posture, I mean security posture, to have that defense in place. So it's important that that's where even the convergence is kind of helping quite a lot of customers we've already been working with and helping out. So I just want to kind of have this as well in terms of where we are. The traditional identities is basically human identities, right? We've been using human identities and privileged identities, but now it's exploding. The attack surface is so huge because of the machines and APIs and bot identities. I think we need to understand how to manage these, and it's become extremely difficult. So identities have been weakest links, and they are still, and they are a lot. So it's become that much more complicated and hard. So just to understand identities and how typically customers or any of the solutions being deployed over there, they're all segmented, like I said, right? You have one for MFA, maybe an SSO from a more of a business driven, and then you have one for PAM or CIEM, API security. So everything is segregated, segmented, silos, and imagine the cost that you need to put in to get resources per product or get resources in terms of investing, in terms of how much infra you need, right, for each product, plus the support and maintenance of these. So the cost is kind of exponentially increasing, but are you getting the full ROI really? So that's something that we need to look at, right? War, where, how, uh, in a single view is what we are going towards from an Arcon perspective. So just reimagine this, right? We're talking about machine business privileged IDs, and then like I said, segmented MFA, SSO, GIT, and then built on zero trust overall, which has a continuous assessment, and then which gives me a virtual access platform, which is accessing your business apps, endpoints, data centers, and etc. And that's where your the whole strong security and secrets governance comes into the picture. So overall, identity-centric security will have to be built on convergence, right? And that's important to understand in how you design your company strategy and security strategy. And I just want to kind of also put in perspective for leadership on how you need to think about convergence going forward, right? I talked about why we need convergence, what we're trying to achieve here, and all those things. But it's very important to start adopting converged identity platforms, right? Prioritize platforms that unify these to give a much better control and visibility. And then quantify your cyber risk financially, right? Essentially, you're saying that technical threats into financial impacts. What are the impacts and how do we manage these? And then align your IT risk and compliance, break the silos, analyze everything as a single thing. Don't get into multiple of these aspects where you have a more financial threats as well. And then have that cyber resilience strategy rooted in your shared goals, right? Basically, you moving your business goals into security strategy. So that's important how you do it. And finally, foster cyber aware culture, right? Empower employees, defense awareness. I think that helps. I've seen where employees have to go to multiple different systems and kind of have the understanding of how they're just bored. They're not able to do everything at one shot. So a single pane will help them as well. So that's what we want to kind of get into. So quick conclusion, like I said, especially for Philippines, I thought this is something hard because Philippines are BSP circulars, AFSA, good, very progressive, nice, but I think again, compliance is one, resilience is one, right? So resilience is what I'm trying to say, that we need to get into that mode of understanding and converging overall. And beyond compliance to convergence, same thing, right? Regulations are necessary, not sufficient. Innovation through integration, you need to integrate more and get these things together along with integration to other systems in terms of maybe an ITDR or EPM, endpoint privilege management, etc. So essentially evaluate your current identity management strategy, understand where you are, understand the opportunities you can have to converge and get things in better place. So with that, I think I'm good. Yeah. On time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kashyap Vuppuluri. Round of applause, please. Same goes. Before I let you go, I'll ask you a message for our attendees today. If they only remember one thing about or from your presentation, what is the one key imperative that defines the future of cyber resilience in a digital world?
Yeah, so like I said in the last slide as well, right? We're talking about resilience from an understanding of how to mitigate your either financial aspects or mitigate your gaps and remove the overall issues that you could have with multiple different vendors or solutions. It's better to have that convergence in place, have that a single understanding of defense where everything is done pretty neatly and easily, right?
Thank you very much. Now, can we show them the quick visual summary of what he presented today? There you go. We talked about security fragmentation, that it creates risks. Of course, we talked about cyber resilience. Go ahead, take photos. And then, of course, we also tapped on banking sector. There you go. We'll give you a few more seconds. I think that's it. Thank you very much once again, Mr. Kashyap Vuppuluri, for that insightful presentation. Please give him a round of applause.